If I had watched this video before I bought it, I probably wouldn't have bought it. What is up, beautiful fish lovers, and welcome to another episode of Puff Daddy Reef. Today we have the Kessil A360X Refugium LED light. We're gonna do an unboxing, then we're gonna compare specs and features, then we're gonna compare it to the H380 Horticultural light. Next, we're gonna take par readings of both and also compare it to the A360X regular aquarium light, tuna blue. And then we're gonna talk about a future grow out program, but also I have my Wi-Fi dongle, so we'll also talk about the controllable software for this light. We've got a lot to get to, so let's get started. Watch all the way to the end, and I will talk about the 5 things I love about this light, as well as 3 things that I hate about it. If you are new to the channel, hit subscribe, and for people who are already subscribed to the channel, please hit that bell. Only 10% of my subscribers actually have notifications enabled, so hit that bell and scroll down to enable all notifications. It helps me a lot. Thanks. So we're gonna open up this box. The box is basically purple to indicate the color of light. Other than that, it looks pretty much like the box for the Kessil Tuna Blue. It talks about some of the features here. Of course, the first one is the dense matrix LED that improves color blending and also creates a nice point source. Now, you're not gonna be using the Refugium as something that you're showcasing, so I don't think there's as much advantage of this technology for a light in the sump. The only advantage is the fact that you can add different sorts of optics on it to help narrow the beam to minimize light spillage within the sump. So I'll give it to that. That might be a positive feature of it. Of course, it has the same advanced thermal system as the Kessil A360X Tuna Blue, and I've liked this a lot. These lights run silent, and so far I haven't had a fan fail, so I'm pretty happy with that. Of course, the spectrum, that's the biggest thing that's different here. It is a tunable spectrum that is specifically for growing algae, but it has some features for growing other things like tomatoes and flowering plants. And then there's also the monitoring mode, and I really like this because it means I only need one light in my sump. I can turn it on monitoring mode and maybe take out the reflector, and then it'll create a lot of light in the tank. And the monitoring mode is basically a full spectrum light to just help you see, because the purple light is actually kind of hard on the eyes. And then of course there is the smart control. So that's basically everything for the box. And it says that it works with the Spectral Controller X, but I've heard that they're waiting on a firmware update for that. So let's go ahead and open up the box. And here it is. I've got to be careful not to throw this on the floor. Ta-da! So like standard Kessil unboxings, you basically have your quick start guide here. This is going to show you how to properly wire the light. There is also a warranty card, which I just threw on the ground. Comes with a sticker. It's kind of pretty. I wish it was a cool aquarium focused sticker, but it does show a different spectrum, which is cool. Now we open it up and now we see the light, and it looks just like the Kessil 360X. In fact, this says A360X, doesn't even say Refugium on it, but you know it is because the color options here are Grow, Bloom, Red, and Daylight. The setting comes on Daylight, and what's really interesting is I expected that this switch to actually be discrete clicks. So in the Kessil H380, the switch actually goes click, click, click between the different settings. And it looks like here they allow you to actually blend the settings. Now, I like that and I don't like that. I like it because maybe you can get a spectrum that looks the right purple to you. Still really doesn't matter. But the part that I don't like is that there's not like a positive detent for the daylight mode. Like, I imagine what I would want to do is quickly switch from bloom to daylight, but now when my light is mounted to the ceiling of the tank, I'm not going to be able to feel 1, 2 click, okay, I'm on bloom, that's where I want to be, switch back to daylight, let's switch back to daylight. It's easy to get to daylight because it's the end of the stop, but it's going to be annoying to go back to those other settings. Fortunately, I think I'm probably going to be operating on glow. Oh shoot, yeah, blue is on the other side of the spectrum and grow is there. So, you know, I don't like the switch design already. I think there should be positive detents. This is not a show light. It doesn't need continuous color blending. And so that's a knock on it already. So let's continue with the unboxing though, and we'll talk about the rest of the features later. So of course it has the K-Link things, and then your intensity switch and your cable. Now let's get the light out. And here's the light. It comes pre-installed with the reflector, so this light costs as much as the aquarium, the tuna blue light. However, the tuna blue light doesn't come with the reflector, so you're getting that maybe, you know, 30 bucks for free. However, most people aren't going to be willing to pay this much for this type of light. So we open it up, and the form factor, there's not much to talk about there because it pretty much looks like the other light. You can take this reflector off because it's magnetic, and you can see all of the LEDs in there. And there actually are quite a lot of LEDs. I'm going to count, but I think there's probably as much as there are on the tuna blue light. And that's about it. So it feels really firm. I feel like this is a plastic top plate, plastic on the side. And yeah, the whole housing's plastic, which is different than the other lights. They used to be metal. This probably helps them keep it cooler. I don't know, maybe it's just easier to manufacture. So I'm gonna set this down and we'll pull out the last thing of the box, and then we're gonna get straight into specs and features. So the other thing in here, you have a power supply. That's always good to have. And the last thing in the box are cables. Oh, and I forgot, mounting hardware. So a nice thing about these lights is they do have mounting hardware, and they're really easy to mount wherever you want. So these little hooks here, you can just screw them in the top of the aquarium sump, and that's what I'm gonna do. And then there's also this little keyring type loop that screws straight into the center of the bottom of the light, and it has some other sorts of mounts for hanging it. So that is the unboxing. Let's talk more about the light, plug it in, and see how it looks. Before I plug this in, the very first thing I'm gonna do is make labels for all the cords. I hate not knowing what plug goes to what. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for. And it is plugged in. And wow, there we go. So we're gonna go through all the spectrum. This first spectrum is the blue. Doesn't seem too bright. I will do par readings on everything in just a moment, so stay tuned for that. The next we have grow. You can do an interesting in between blue and grow. And then it gets really visually bright for the bloom setting. And so this is blue, bloom, grow, blue. And then the next one is red, all the way over there. And then white is just, it just suddenly clicks over to white. But there's still no physical feel to that. It's just suddenly the light goes white. It turns off all those red LEDs. So let's do a sweep through the full spectrum. Blue, grow, bloom, red, white. Notice is the reflector actually creates these weird reflection patterns. When I take the reflector off, the light is actually blended a lot better. So if you want perfect blending, maybe this is something to think about for people with the A360Xs. The reflector kind of has, because it has these weird angles, it creates these weird hot spots. But it still looks pretty good at these higher levels, really well blended. When you take that reflector off, and it's just a really wide beam. So you could get this like right to the water and get a ton of spread. Put the reflector off and it narrows it down a bit. Still probably doesn't narrow it down as much as I want because I'm going to be holding this light right underneath the sump. When you hold it like this, you can really see the angle of the beam and you can see how wide that is. But without the reflector, look at this. Look at how wide that thing is. Today we'll be comparing two lights, the Kessil H380 grow light. This is a horticulture light that most people use for the refugiums in their aquarium, and the new purpose-built aquarium-specific refugium light, the Kessil A360X Refugium. Now there's a number of differences between these two lights. First, this one's significantly cheaper. Also, it's a lot older technology. So on the top panel, all we have is 3 settings: off, grow, and bloom. There's no intensity switch, so your only options are 100% power at all times. In order to adjust the intensity of the light, you have to move it farther or closer to your target. The light is also much taller in form factor than the Kessil 360X Refugium. and it's a little bit more narrow. The Refugium Light has a color and intensity light, and they are both smooth turn dials. This one is just instant clicks, so if you're manually operating it, it's just click on, click off. One click on to grow and you know they're there. 2 clicks all the way to bloom, which I don't really think you're going to use much in a Refugium. The number of LEDs on this light is 53 from what I could count, and on this light is 52. So they both have the same number of LEDs. However, this light has more channels, so this light has the green channel and also a white channel, which means less LEDs in the new light are actually creating the spectrum that is specifically tuned for producing algae. And that kind of manifests that in maybe some differences in PAR. And you can also see that there's some differences in PAR that are probably the result of different reflector designs. We'll talk about that in depth a lot later. Other differences though, there's not too much that's different. There's a number of things that are pretty the same, which is the mounting hardware is the same for both, which is really nice. And they also both use 90-watt power supplies. So it's a significant difference here though in the controllability. The new light, of course, can control through K-Link and use the Wi-Fi dongle. And this light pretty much had no capabilities, so you're just turning it on and off on the outlet. So no control capability on this. This also has the old fan, which is a little bit louder than this new light. And there's a lot more in-depth differences that we're going to talk about right now. So this is the H380. And here's the 360X Refugium with the reflector on. So this is our light coverage experiment. This is the Kessil H380 horticulture light. It is 6 inches above the surface, and the spread appears to be about 14 inches at the widest extents, but the evenly blended area is more around, I would say, 12.5 inches, where it's nice and blended. Now the 360X with the reflector on, looks like we're about at 18 inches from the primary area, and if you subtract out maybe about 2 inches to get to where the light is a lot more even, it's about 16 inches. So around 16 to 18 inches of spread, 6 inches above the surface. It's a little bit more than the other light. Without the reflector, it's really hard to judge the bounds of the light. When hanging at 6 inches, it looks like it's probably spanning, I would say, about 24 inches or 2 feet. But the light is very well blended without the reflector, and it's really difficult to tell the transition area. But I would say between 22 inches is going to be where the light is generally pretty even, and then maybe 24 is where the light is reaching. But there's even parts of light that are probably spanning up to 30 inches. So now we're going to discuss controlling the Wi-Fi dongle. I just turned on the app and you pull it up and you'll see that typically there's already a category for the Refugium, and I'm going to hit the on button. That is going to turn on the control to the Refugium light, and the light will turn on. You can see here that it's already set to manual Refugium and grow. I'm going to click on that to show that the light is connected, and this is the default Refugium light area group. You can make more groups and rearrange them, but it's unlikely that you'll have multiple groups of the Refugium light. Then you click on the mode button down here, and you can see there's different presets for manual control. Let me swipe up. There's manual Refugium, preset Refugium, and a daylight mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the manual Refugium settings to show you the different light colors. So when I click edit here, you can see that right now it is on grow at intensity of 100. You're probably always going to run at 100. And the interesting thing here is that it comes preset with the white levels set to 35 and the green levels set to 64. Now for Refugium light, I don't know why you would have green levels at all, because the green is, that's why the plant is green, because it's actually reflecting that wavelength. It's not a useful wavelength for it. So any of that green light is there for your visual pleasure, but when you're not using it, what you want to do is turn that green all the way down, and when it's all the way down, that's going to show you, that's going to reduce the excess heat that's going into the tank and light that just hits the plant and is reflected off. Now the white that is a more wider spectrum, so some of that will be used for photosynthesis, some of it will be reflected. So it's up to you if you want to include that. I typically, in this situation, I'll probably turn up white like all the way, and because that will increase the overall par output of the light, and I know at least some of that light intensity is going to be used. But let's go back through the colors. So like I said, the first one is Grow. It comes with this preset. And then the next one, we have Blue. And that's just kind of a very pleasant general blue color. For some reason, the blue is also coming with this additional white and green. And then let's go to Bloom. Now the Bloom also has additional white and green settings in here. And then let's click on Red. And the red also has the white and green setting turned up, which actually makes it orange. So I don't know why that is. I think this was just to show that you can change these things when you first turn it on. So I'm going to go through all the colors with those settings turned down just so you can see what it looks like in the pure color. This is probably how you're going to set it. So there is red. Now we're going to go back to Bloom and turn down those other colors. And so that is the pure Bloom color. Go back to Blue, turn down those other settings, and that is the pure blue color. And then we're going to go back to Grow, turn down those settings one last time, and show you what the color is on the pure Grow setting. So once again, I don't know why these are here, but I do like the control because I'll probably run it something like this with the Grow and that up to 100%. Now what's interesting here is the top slider gives you complete control, so you can dial down basically any setting in between, all the way from red down to the blue setting. Now you can't get to pure white from this setting. In order for the Refugium Light to go to daylight mode, what you have to do is swipe up here, and then you click on daylight mode, and then that will go to daylight mode, which actually almost looks a little yellow because we're used to seeing a little blue in things. Unfortunately, I don't think you can do daylight mode while also adding some, white or other things to make it a little brighter. What I would probably do is I would go back to the manual mode, and then I would create a preset here. That would be my color that I would like for visual pleasure. So I'd probably go all the way to blue, the blue setting, and then I would probably just crank up the white and maybe crank up the green, but that's too green actually. I think the green at like 50. Now that is a very pleasurable viewing color. So I'm gonna click there, and that'll add that as a preset to my presets. So I can go straight to that blue, which is what I like for viewing. So we'll swipe up. We already looked at daylight mode. Another thing that we don't see here when I go back to manual is there's no other settings. There's no lightning, there's no thunderstorm. A little disappointed that we don't have Refugium thunderstorms available to us like you do when you're looking at, let's see, manual tuna blue for this group. You can have the effects tabs and you can do all these cool things. Come on, guys. Alright, so I'm just joking on that. Once again, it's Refugium Light. You don't need all that control. But then when you click on Preset Refugium, you can actually go into your Grow mode where it has the Refugium Light on at night and it's brighter at night. You can click Preview and that'll preview it. And it's basically 100% on the Grow setting, and then ramps down to 0 during the day, and then it's off, and then it will basically ramp up. One thing interesting to note here is, 1, it goes straight to 100%, and 2, their presets are 0 for the white and 0 for the green, which is kind of funny that those aren't also the presets in the manual mode. But whatever, that is how it is set up, and basically, you can do all the normal sort of add your different points, but you don't get any effects. Alright, so now we've saved that, and I'm going to actually leave it on preset Refugium. So that is the overview of the controller. The only other interesting thing I'd like to show you is in settings, if you actually want to look at your different lights, you can click on this and you can update your dongle. You can also look at the version for all of your lights. Now the Refugium Light is just listed as an A360X, so it's actually hard to tell which one it is. You have to write down your serial number. It doesn't say like A360X Refugium, but you can see mine right there is this one that has version 1.0 of the firmware, and all the other ones are the Tuna Blue versions. So that is the overview of the software. So we just finished taking PAR readings of the light in the sump in a realistic sump condition. Now the sump water was about 7 inches deep. I was taking PAR readings at the bottom of those 7 inches. Your Kato might be floating at the top, sometimes at the bottom, but it's generally going to be within that range. I went with the conservative 7 inches deep, and then the light was tested at 20 inches above the water's surface, 10 inches, and 6 inches. The reason why I tested 20 inches above the water's surface is because that is the ideal location for me to mount a light in this tank. The sump of the Red Sea Reefer Peninsula 650 is pretty tall. There's a lot of headroom in there, and I really wanted a light at the ceiling so I can work underneath it without having to dodge any sort of light. I think a lot of reefers have a similar situation where they want their Refugium light relatively high and out of the way, which is pretty different to how you typically operate an LED light on the top of the tank that is providing nourishment for your coral. Now, when I tested it at this high, it was obviously way higher than the manufacturer even envisioned being used, and the PAR readings were somewhat dismal. The Kessil A360X Refugium light with the reflector on, this is the 55-degree reflector, was only generating about 76 PAR for the grow light color from that height. Now 76 PAR from that height just isn't going to cut it. There was substantial light bleed because 55 degrees at that height is actually pretty wide, and I really wish that Kessil would also come out with a reflector that's a little more narrow, like 30 degrees, so I can get that light down and deep into my tank. However, the Kessil H380, the old version that this one is supposed to make obsolete, was actually commanding a pretty good PAR. It was generating almost 200 PAR at that 20-inch level. So this light is perfectly fine for how I want to run it, nice and high, out of my way, 200 PAR, that's enough to grow Kato. But the new light, it's just running about half the PAR. So what do we get when we run it at 10 inches? Well, in the grow mode at 10 inches for the brand new Kessil A360X was generating a PAR of about 226. Now compare that to the Kessil H380 that was generating 424 PAR. It's once again, the Kessil H380 is generating about twice as much PAR as the Kessil 360X. Now 424 PAR, that's a lot at 10 inches. That's probably going to be as much PAR as you want. And if you go much lower than that with this light, you might see some bleaching of your Kato. Now, the next thing that we tested was 6 inches. This is really low, especially for a sump. I know it's probably what you're going to run on the lights on the top. Those are generally between like 6 and 10 inches above the water. But above the sump, it's actually pretty low because the head of my skimmer cup is substantially over the light. When I have it down at 6 inches, there's a lot of risk for splash and water and foam and other things to get on it that can cause corrosion. And I understand the new light was built to be a little more robust to those things, but I can't imagine that it's good for it to be exposed to actually, real splashes other than just humidity. But regardless, at 6 inches, it was finally generating a decent enough PAR at about 389. Now that's powerful light. That'll do well at that low level. And of course this light, the old light, the Kessil H380, was blowing it out of the water at 6 inches. I mean, 6 inches, it's doing 766 PAR on the gross setting. That's a lot. That'll definitely bleach your algae. If you're not careful, you'd have to do a reduced cycle. So pretty powerful, but once again, who's going to run it at 6 inches? The Kessil 360X needs some serious rethinking on the architecture of it. It's a refugium light in the body of a coral grow out light and a display tank light, and they're just two different types of operations. Now, with the Kessil A360X, I really like some of the new features. I like that you can add in a little bit of light to make the light less harsh. I like that it's controllable. However, I don't think that's really needed for a Refugium light. You're just going to turn it off and turn it on. But overall, I'm just pretty disappointed in the par output of it, and that's even with the narrow reflector. So Kessil, please do your fans a favor and come out with a ultra narrow reflector so we can get decent par numbers at a reasonable height off the water surface. So now it's time for 5 things I love about this light, 3 things I hate about it, and my final verdict. So the first thing I like about it is it's quiet. This new upgraded fan and heatsink is just amazing. The thing hums along with no humming at all. So it's great. Quiet light, love it. The second thing that I really like about this light is the number of spectrum options that we're given. You have blue, grow, bloom, red, a daylight mode for observing things, and then any mixture above. I think that is amazing. The third thing I like about it is the magnet lens sort of deal. I think this is a cool feature, so it makes the light a lot more customizable, and it's something that is an advantage to a point source light, is you can actually use reflectors to change how the light beam goes. What I really want though, Kessil, please, please, please make this is an extra narrow reflector so I can put the light high and out of the way and kind of shoot a beam down right onto my algae in my Refugium. The fourth thing I like about this light is that it is controllable, so it has the K-Link that connects to the Wi-Fi dongle, and you can control it just like you control your other Kessil lights over your aquarium. I think the app is actually pretty good, the dongle's pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with that. And then the fifth thing that I love about this light is, drum roll please, it's kind of simple. It's mounting hardware. It's easy to mount. This single screw here that you can screw in the key ring, and then it comes with hooks for hanging stuff, and under a sump there's always a place to hang it. It's just pretty easy to mount, especially in a sump. You can just hang things anywhere. Those are great things. So 5 things I love about this light. Let's get to the things I hate about this light. Alright, so it's time for 3 things I hate about this light. Now, the first one isn't really a hate, it's a missed opportunity, but I really feel like the settings on this switch here should have been positive detents. It should just click directly from grow to bloom to red to daylight. There doesn't need to be any sort of fine-tuning mixing. The problem here is if you are not using a controller and you have it mounted, you can't easily click from grow to daylight to then work in the sump and then click back. It's completely a guess or tuning with your eye, and it's going to be impossible to get the same setting back every time unless you're actually using the K-Link. So it kind of forces you to use the K-Link or to set it at a particular level and then just never change it, which defeats the purpose of having something like a daylight function. So the second thing I hate about this light is if you watch my results from the PAR test, they're kind of dismal, and I don't know exactly what this is due to. I know partially it's due to this being a wider angle lens than you find on the H380, but then I also compared this to the Kessil, the PAR readings to the Kessil 360 Tuna Blue, and the Tuna Blue light was also generating about twice as much PAR than this at the same heights. So if I'm getting twice as much PAR, and PAR stands for photosynthetic active radiation, which is the stuff that the algae is going to use to grow, if the Tuna Blue is getting twice as much PAR, why am I buying this? I don't know, except that it has more visually orange and purple colors, but you're actually getting way more PAR out of the Tuna Blue at the same level. And when you compare it to this, if you want just the grow spectrum, this is also going to do twice the PAR. So that's a big letdown. I don't feel like that's an upgrade, and I'm really trying to figure this one out. I'm scratching my head about it. So then the last thing that I hate about this light is, of course, the price. This is $450. You can get a lot of other grow lights much cheaper than this. And yeah, if you like, the Gucci sump, you want it super classy, top notch, sure, you can throw your money on this, but I would say this is just as good for growing algae, if not better. Why not get the H380? Okay, maybe this is better for a saltwater environment, maybe a little more durable, but it just doesn't make sense. $450 is a lot. So now it is time for the verdict. Should you upgrade from a Kessil H380 to this H360X Refugium Light? Probably not. In fact, you're gonna get half the par, you're gonna get wider spread, and as long as this thing is working, I would keep chugging along using it. Now, if you were gonna buy a Refugium Light from scratch and starting with nothing, should you get this, or could you consider getting something like another Kessil 360X Tuna Blue? In my opinion, this Kessil 360X Tuna Blue is probably worth $450 because it has the ability to be used as a aquarium light. It can grow coral. It has resale value because it is a aquarium light, so people can use it on any tank even if they don't have refugiums. And it produces twice as much par as the Refugium Light. I'm pretty sure that it's gonna grow the algae just as fast, if not faster, than the Refugium specific light. But that is something that I will test, so please subscribe and find out if there's any reason at all to buy this Refugium specific light. So if I were you, I would probably get just another Tuna Blue 360X, one of my favorite aquarium LED lights. Instead of this, use this to grow algae. You can crank up the red channel, you can crank up the UV channel, and really make it look like its own Refugium type of spectrum. I'll show you what that looks like in the control. And then save your money on this. So that's my verdict. If I had watched this video before I bought it, I probably wouldn't have bought it. And thank you very much for watching. Happy reefing, and I'll see you around.